The shovel hit something that wasn't root or rock. It made a dull metal sound that stopped the whole backyard like someone had muted the world. Maya's phone buzzed in her palm again with the same bank alert she had been pretending not to open, and her iced Starbucks on the patio table had turned watery and warm, but she still took a sip like it could calm her hands. One of the workers knelt down and brushed dirt away with his glove, and looked up at her with a face that said he didn't want to be the one to tell her. "Ma'am, you should come see this," he said quietly. Maya stepped closer barefoot on the cool concrete, and her stomach tightened as if the ground had shifted under her house. They had only been trying to remove a dying tree. Now something underground was staring back at them. Maya stood in the backyard with her shoes off, feeling the cold concrete under her feet, while the morning sun sat low behind the houses and made long shadows across the grass. She kept her phone in her hand, even though she had promised herself she would not check it again because every vibration made her chest tighten, and her shoulders rise without permission. The tree company truck was parked half on the driveway, and half on the street like it did not belong to the quiet routine of the neighborhood, and that alone made the day feel heavier than it already was. The cottonwood tree had been there longer than Maya had. It leaned slightly toward the fence and dropped leaves that clogged the gutter. Every fall for years she told herself the tree was a good thing because it gave shade and privacy and made the yard feel alive, but this year it started to look tired and weak, and it reminded her too much of how she felt most mornings when the alarm rang and she reached for her phone before she was fully awake. She bought the house after the divorce because it was what she could afford, and because she needed something that belonged to her alone. The rooms were smaller than she imagined, and the walls were thin, and the furnace made a strange noise at night. Still, she told herself it was a fresh start, because that sounded stronger than saying she was scared, and alone she painted the kitchen herself one weekend while her son Noah stayed with his father, and the silence felt louder than any argument they had ever had. Maya worked from home 3 days a week, sitting at the small table near the window with her laptop and a mug that never stayed hot long enough. Her job paid the bills most months but never left much room for mistakes. Every call she took was someone else explaining loss and frustration, and she learned how to keep her voice calm while her mind counted minutes and numbers. When the call ended, she often stared at the screen for a moment before moving on because the feelings did not disappear just because the system asked her to. Money followed her everywhere like a low hum she could never turn off. She planned meals around sales and checked her account balance more than she wanted to admit. Sometimes she stood in the grocery store aisle and felt embarrassed by how long she studied prices. She wanted to be the kind of parent who said yes without thinking, but she had learned how to pause and calculate first. Noah was 10 and growing fast and asking questions that caught her off guard. He noticed when she sighed while opening mail, and when she stayed quiet during dinner. He missed his father, even when he pretended not to, and Maya carried guilt for things she could not fix. She tried to show up in small ways, packing his lunch, writing notes, helping with homework, even when her mind was tired. The tree became another problem she could not delay. A branch fell during a windy night, and the sound woke her from sleep with her heart racing. The next morning the neighbor sent a polite message and a photo that made it clear the tree was no longer safe. Maya spent her lunch break calling companies and listening to explanations she barely understood. She chose the one that did not rush her and did not make her feel foolish for asking questions. When the workers arrived, she felt exposed, like her private life was on display. She watched from the kitchen as they moved through the yard with practiced ease. The sound of the saw cut through the quiet neighborhood, and she flinched every time it started. The smell of fresh wood drifted inside and reminded her of camping trips from years ago when life felt simpler. As the tree came down in pieces, the yard looked emptier and brighter. Without the shade, the house felt more visible to the world. Maya crossed her arms and tried to convince herself that this was necessary and responsible. She thought about the bill and how she would shift things around to make it work. She thought about Noah and how she wanted the house to feel safe for him. The stump grinder moved closer and chewed into the base of the tree. Wood chips scattered, and the noise filled the space like static. Then the sound changed. It was sharp and wrong, and everyone stopped at once. The sudden quiet made Maya aware of her own breathing. One of the workers knelt and brushed dirt away with his glove. The foreman stepped closer and frowned. Maya felt a strange pull in her chest and walked toward them without thinking. Something flat and solid appeared beneath the dirt. It did not look natural, and it did not belong there. Maya stood still and felt the weight of the moment settle over her. She did not know why, but she felt like the ground under her house was holding a secret that had waited a long time to be seen. Maya stood a few steps away while the workers brushed more dirt aside, and the shape under the ground became clearer with every slow movement. Her hands were cold, even though the sun had risen higher, and she tucked them into the sleeves of her sweatshirt like that might steady her. The foreman spoke quietly to the others, and then turned to her, and asked if she wanted them to stop, or keep going. Maya opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out at first, because part of her wanted to pretend this was not real, and part of her felt pulled toward it in a way she could not explain. She nodded and said keep going in a voice that sounded smaller than she expected. The workers moved carefully, now no longer treating the job like routine labor, but like something personal. Dirt fell away in clumps, and soon the object was mostly uncovered. It was a metal box about the size of a small suitcase with rusted edges and faded paint. It looked old, like it had been there longer than the house itself. Maya felt a tight pressure behind her eyes. She could not explain why this moment felt heavy, but it did. It reminded her of opening boxes after the divorce when she found things she had forgotten and feelings she had tried to bury. She took a slow breath and crouched down beside the foreman. Near the latch there was a thin plastic sleeve cracked with age inside. It was a folded piece of paper, yellowed and fragile. The foreman hesitated and looked at Maya before touching it. She nodded again, and he handed it to her carefully like it might fall apart. Maya unfolded the paper with shaking fingers. The handwriting was faded, but still clear enough to read. Her breath caught when she saw her last name written across the top, not the name she used now, but the one from before her marriage, and before her life split in two. Her knees felt weak, and she had to sit back on the grass. The workers stepped away, giving her space without being asked. Maya stared at the name, and felt memories rush in without warning. Her father teaching her how to write it in neat letters, her mother saying it with pride, a time when that name felt solid and safe. She read the rest slowly. The note was short, and written in a careful hand. It mentioned the house and the tree, and keeping something safe for the future. It did not explain much, and that somehow made it feel more real. Whoever wrote it did not expect an audience. Maya folded the paper and pressed it to her chest. Her heart was beating fast and uneven. She looked at the box again, and wondered how many years it had been there unnoticed. She wondered how many storms had passed, and how many families had lived above it without knowing. The foreman asked if she wanted them to open it. Maya hesitated. She thought about her day ahead, and the emails waiting on her laptop. She thought about Noah coming home from school, and asking what she did today. She thought about how tired she was of rushing through moments. She said yes, but please be careful. The latch resisted at first, and then gave way with a soft sound. Inside the box were objects wrapped in cloth, now stiff with age. Maya leaned closer, and recognized a few things immediately. There was an old photo frame with a picture of her parents standing in front of the house when it was new. They looked younger and hopeful, and she felt a wave of grief for the time that had passed. There were letters tied with string, their envelopes worn and thin. There was a small notebook with her father's handwriting on the cover. Maya felt tears slip down her face without her noticing at first. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. Even though no one was watching closely, she picked up the notebook and opened it. Inside were notes about the house repairs he had done, and thoughts he had written late at night. Some lines were about fear and responsibility, and wanting to leave something behind that mattered. Maya realized then that this was not about money or property. It was about being seen, and remembered her father had buried these things during a hard time. She barely remembered he had been laid off when she was young, and worried about losing the house. She remembered the tension, and the quiet dinners, and the way he tried to hide his stress. She sat there on the grass, feeling closer to him than she had in years. She understood something new about the weight he carried, and the choices he made. It did not fix her problems or erase her worries, but it shifted something inside her. The foreman asked if she was okay. Maya nodded and thanked him for stopping and for being patient. She asked if they could finish later, and he agreed without hesitation. As the truck pulled away, the backyard felt quiet again, but not empty. Maya gathered the box and carried it inside carefully. She placed it on the kitchen table where bills and mail usually piled up. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel rushed. She felt connected to a story bigger than her own struggles. She knew life would still be hard tomorrow, the bills would still come, and the worries would not disappear, but she also knew she was not as alone as she often felt. The ground beneath her house had reminded her of that. Maya did not return to her laptop after the workers left. She stood in the kitchen for a long time, looking at the box on the table, like it might move on its own. The afternoon light came through the window and landed on the surface where bills usually sat, and for once she did not push the feeling away. She sat down slowly and rested her hands on her knees and felt the tiredness catch up to her. She opened the notebook again and read more carefully. Her father had written in short lines, sometimes neat, sometimes rushed. He wrote about fear of failing, and fear of not being enough. He wrote about wanting Maya to feel safe, even when he was unsure himself. Each page felt like a quiet conversation she never knew they were having. Maya felt something break open inside her. She realized how much pressure she had been carrying without naming it, the constant effort to look okay, to sound capable, to never let things fall apart. She thought strength meant staying quiet and pushing through. She had learned that lesson early, and it had followed her into adulthood. Her phone buzzed again, and this time she looked. It was a message from her supervisor reminding her about a missed report. Maya stared at the screen and felt a wave of panic rise. The familiar tightness in her chest returned, and for a moment she wanted to close everything and pretend none of it mattered. She stood up and walked into the living room. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. Every corner held reminders of unfinished tasks and expectations. The couch still had a dent from where her ex used to sit. The hallway wall had a mark from when they moved furniture during the last argument. Maya leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. She felt anger, then sadness, then exhaustion, all mixing together. She thought about how hard it was to ask for help, how she had learned to do everything herself because depending on others felt risky. Noah would be home soon. She wondered what she would say if he asked about the tree. She wondered how much of her worry he already carried without her knowing. The thought made her throat tighten. She returned to the kitchen and picked up one of the letters from the box. The envelope was thin and brittle inside. Her father had written about a night when he sat at the same table worried about money and the future. He wrote about feeling ashamed of that worry. He wrote that he buried the box because he did not want his fear to be the only thing he left behind. Maya sat down hard in the chair. She realized how familiar that sounded. She had been hiding her own fear from Noah, thinking it would protect him, but maybe it only made the distance larger. Her breathing became uneven, and she pressed her hands flat against the table. Tears came again, stronger this time, and she did not wipe them away. She let them fall because holding them back felt heavier than letting go. This was the breaking point, not a loud moment, or a dramatic one, just the quiet understanding that she could not keep living this way, always bracing for the next problem, always telling herself she would rest later. She thought about calling her mother, but hesitated. Their conversations had become short and careful over the years. Still, she picked up her phone and pressed call before she could change her mind. Her mother answered with surprise and concern. Maya tried to speak, but her voice broke. She apologized out of habit and then stopped. She told her mother about the tree and the box and the letters. She told her how tired she was of pretending everything was fine. There was silence on the other end, and then her mother spoke softly. She said she wished Maya had called sooner. She said it was okay to be tired. She said she was proud of her even when things were messy. Maya felt something release inside her chest, not all the way but enough to breathe a little easier. They talked until Noah came home, and Maya watched him drop his backpack by the door. He looked at her face and knew something was different. She ended the call and hugged him tightly. He asked what was wrong, and she told him the truth in simple words. She said she was having a hard day, but she was okay. She told him about the tree and how it held memories. Noah listened quietly and then asked if they could plant something new later. The question surprised her. She nodded and smiled through tears. That night after Noah fell asleep, Maya sat alone on the couch. The house still had problems, and the future was still uncertain, but she felt a shift. She was not just surviving anymore, she was beginning to understand herself. She looked at the box one last time before bed. It was not a solution, it was a reminder that fear did not mean failure, and that even buried things could be found again. The next morning Maya woke before her alarm and lay still, listening to the quiet house. The air felt different, not lighter exactly, but less tight, like something had loosened overnight. She made coffee and stood by the window watching a jogger pass and a neighbor load kids into a car. Life outside kept moving the same way it always had, and that grounded her. She sat at the kitchen table where the box still rested, and opened the notebook one more time. This time she did not read it with pain, but with recognition. Her father had been scared and unsure, and still he showed up every day. He fixed what he could, and worried about what he could not, and loved his family through it all. Maya realized she had been measuring herself by impossible standards. She believed she had to be calm and strong, and prepared at all times, but maybe being present and honest mattered more than appearing unbreakable. She logged into work late and sent a short message to her supervisor. She explained she had a family matter and would catch up by the end of the day. Her hands shook as she pressed send, but nothing terrible happened. The reply was brief and understanding, and that alone felt like a small relief. After work she picked Noah up from school, and they stopped by the hardware store. He walked beside her talking about a project he was excited about. Maya listened more closely than usual, noticing the way his voice rose when he cared. She felt grateful for this ordinary moment. They chose a small young tree, nothing fancy, just something that would grow. Noah held the tag and asked questions about how long it would take. Maya told him the truth, that it would take years. He said that was okay because they would be there. In the backyard they dug together where the old tree had been. The ground was still uneven, and the air smelled like dirt and fresh starts. Maya felt the ache in her arms, and welcomed it. It reminded her she was doing something real. As they worked she told Noah a little about his grandfather. She shared how he worried and tried, and loved. Noah listened, and nodded like he understood more than she expected. He placed the tree carefully into the hole, and patted the soil down. When they finished they stood back and looked at it. It was small and thin, and a little awkward, but it was there. That night Maya put the letters back into the box but kept the notebook out. She placed it on the shelf in the living room where she could see it, not hidden, not buried. Before bed she paid one bill and left the rest for tomorrow. She did not feel guilty about it. She knew she would keep going one step at a time. Lying in the dark she thought about how life did not change all at once. There was no sudden fix, no perfect ending, just moments of clarity that pointed her in a better direction. She understood now that resilience was not about never breaking. It was about noticing when something needed care. It was about asking for help, and telling the truth, and planting something new even when the ground felt uncertain. Outside the backyard was quiet. The new tree stood still under the night sky. It would take time to grow, so would she. And for the first time in a long while that felt enough.